Welcome to Creating Your Own Curriculum, Lessons Learned from a District Team. We've got the amazing Zach Chase and Nannette McMurty with us. I'm Tess. I'm from Writable. Zach and Nannette are from Vrain Valley School District in Colorado. We work closely with them. And this is going to all be about how they have created their own curriculum. Writable supported them during that work, and the challenges, the successes, their advice, and really how they went through this process. So a little bit about Writable. So Writable is everything you need to teach and organize writing or in reading instruction in grades K through 12. So we have over 1,000 customizable assignments and prompts. We give you data on student writing as they're writing, and we have a lot of feedback tools, including AI tools to help save teachers time and improve student writing as they're writing. So it facilitates writing practice, feedback, grading, informal or formal assessments, even just simply understanding where your students are at the beginning of the year, and customized curriculums, which is what we're going to be talking about today. So whether you are looking to edit a curriculum you've purchased, create your own curriculum, you're a teacher creating curriculum by yourself, or you're a school district looking to create curriculum for a whole bunch of your schools, Writable has the tools to support that. And we also are integrated with major LMSs in Google Classroom and Docs. So it's got all the tools you need and that you already use in one place. So a little bit about the wonderful Zach and Nannette. So Zach is the District Secondary ELA Curriculum and Library Media Services Coordinator at St. Vrain. St. Vrain has about 32,000 students right outside of Denver, Colorado. So they are big one-to-one district with 50 plus elementary and secondary schools, so they're pretty large. He's responsible for curriculum development, curation, library support, and media curation. Zach has taught in Florida and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania as a middle and high school ELA teacher. He was last in Philadelphia Science Leadership Academy, which is an inquiry-driven project-based school where he planned and coordinated professional learning. He's also worked with schools and school systems nationally and internationally, as you mentioned a little bit about your work in Pakistan, and to consider how to create learning spaces that tap into human curiosity while building pathways to student academic success. He has co-authored a book called Building School 2.0, How to Create the Schools We Need, and was the lead author of the 2016 National Education Technology Plan while at the U.S. Department of Education during the Obama administration, I think, if that's correct. And then Nannette is an educator also at St. Vrain Valley School District, and as well as school and district leadership. So her past experiences include teaching students in high school English classes, and she will always be an English teacher at heart. In her current role, she supports students, teachers, and administrators implementing innovative learning practices and resources around the district and the new online school Launch Ed. She finds magic in her work. Congratulations. I love that you find magic in your work. And she knows she helps students access and experience learning that empowers them to be creative thinkers, innovators, and problem solvers. She's presented locally and nationally at conferences, and is innovative when it comes to classroom design, blended learning, and the power of teachers as storytellers. So they are pretty awesome people, and I'm really excited for them to take over and talk about how they created their own curriculum.
Thank you, Tess. Thank you, everybody at Writable and edWeb for asking us to come and share our story today. And thank you to everybody who is watching this after what I think was probably one of the hairiest school years on record, certainly for me. So thank you for making the time. We know and understand what that means. So hopefully we can be worthy of your time as we go through. Tess is going to be monitoring the chat, and we'll have a Q&A at the end. But Tess, if there are any questions that come up that are specific to the content we're on, feel free to interrupt. And that's to everybody watching. If there's anything that comes up as we're going, or if we miss a detail, we are classroom teachers at heart. So we are always like, even if 1,000 people show up, we're going to feel only successful if we get all 1,000 of you to where you want to be today. So thank you for joining. We really appreciate it. Saving the resources that are shared. This is bit.ly, and I believe we're going to put the long link in the chat as well for those of you who might be in a network that filters bit.ly links. But all the stuff we're talking about today can be found in that bit.ly, and then the link that just got dropped in the chat. So that's fantastic. All right. You don't need to know any more about us. That's what we look like a little bit closer than right now. All right, here is our next piece. We are super curious about this to get a better sense of who's in the room and who's joining us. So on a scale of 1 to 5, what is your feeling of ownership regarding your district curriculum? So 1, none. I don't feel like I own this stuff at all. Ooh, 1 was the first answer.
Okay.
But
5 is getting bigger.
Whoa, this is so much fun. I'm glad we didn't do a yes or no on this one. Tess, we totally should have done every location in the world. That would have been a fun one to watch.
Right, and then just so that you guys have our previous poll, which is, does your school or district create their own curriculum? 62% of attendees said that they do, and 38% said that they don't. So that's some good background for when we hear this. It's interesting and split.
Wow.
Yeah, this is a lot more evenly split than I was anticipating again. So I'm thankful to have this data.
No bell curve here.
No, well, it's like
tiny little. It'll be a very low pitch.
Right. In chat too. So.
Oh yeah, we do have some coming through in
ones.
the chat as well.
All right.
Well, and hopefully we can provide some definition to what we mean by this as well as we jump in further to our conversation today. But this is really helpful to know that we're kind of a broad spectrum of people defining ownership around our curriculum. So, be interesting.
So what we're going to talk about today, I'm going to take like the first 3 bullet points. We'll start with a little explanation of why in our district we decided to build our own curriculum rather than go out and buy something. And then we'll talk a little bit about the process, because I think that's the piece that, at least internally, most folks were really curious about and maybe a little more hesitant about, because if you've never done it before, you can't necessarily see the process and how we set some goals working through. And then we'll talk about...
Yeah, so the big thing will be building momentum once it was built, and how we did that by bringing in the larger community to be a part of the conversation. We'll talk a little bit about some of the tools and resources that we adopted as part of this work and the processes that we went through to get there. And we're going to wrap up with where we are right now, which is really processing what challenges we still face, maybe some of the things that we missed along the way, and advice for you.
And of course...
questions.
Your questions. Yes. Or maybe we'll just ask questions of all of you and try to read them all as they come through. All right. So first off, why we built our own curriculum. And it goes back to that poll question. When I was in Nannette's role, when I started with the district and was supporting our last secondary ELA adoption. And we went through the traditional process. So we are on a 7-year, if budgets work out and are happy, we are on a 7-year adoption cycle for curriculum in our district. And we know that when we buy a thing, the folks who are most involved with the selection of the curriculum, and maybe the pilot folks, tend to say, okay, we got this. And then if you're lucky, other folks will come on board down the road and say, okay, I like this. But it is all about kind of the used car salesman approach of like, what's it going to take to get you to use our curriculum today? And that is a lot of work that seems disingenuous, I think, to a lot of people. And so it's just about using this stuff, not so much centered on the learning and teaching aspect. So we wanted to build our own curriculum because we could personalize it, we could revise it, we could add to it, we could, when we found the faults that invariably come up in those 7-year cycles, we are able to then kind of make those better as people bring up problems as they're going through. So that was our real hope, is how do we own this? Not me, not Nannette, not the district, but we can point to the teachers in our classrooms across our district who built these pieces of what we're using today. I'm not going to go too deeply into this. Tess, you gave a lot of this information. But yeah, one of the pieces that I think is important here is that we serve 14?
I think we're at 14.
We're in 14 different communities, municipalities across our district. And they run everything from the foothills of the Rocky Mountains to almost the plains.
To the plains.
Yeah, and so we have in a diversity of geographies and a diversity of representation, kind of everything in between there as well. So that's really important to this story of ownership and making sure that the design of what we built was able to serve the needs of all of those municipalities as we were going through.
Yep.
All right. Here we go.
I'll let you get started on this one.
All right, thanks. So why build our ELA curriculum? When we started this journey, we have a secondary ELA leadership team, and we sat down with them at the last meeting, and I said, all right, we're about to begin an adoption process, and we have two paths available to us. One is the traditional path, and the other one is the path of building it ourselves. And we laid out what that process would look like and why. And one of them is the responsiveness to student needs and making sure that we are building things that are representative to demographic information, are representative of where students are on their learning journeys, and are representative of their interests. Because if you know ELA, and that's what we built, but I think that so much of this journey applies to other disciplines as well. If you know ELA, then if a book's not what a kid wants to read at that time, or if it was written kind of before anybody in your building was born, then you're might not be meeting their needs, especially if they are a reluctant or nascent reader.
I think also to jump in there too, the other thing that we were finding is that we did have, we had a lot of people, of course, we had the adopted curriculum, but then they were still just going and doing their own thing anyways because they wanted to meet the student needs and to be responsive. But then what was happening is those experiences weren't equitable across the system. So if you had a teacher who was doing that extra work, and we'll talk in a second about kind of unifying instruction, well, then you got to have that experience of a diverse text base, diverse assignments, opportunities for real world learning. But if you didn't, and you had a teacher who was doing the district adopted curriculum, your experience was different. And so we really also found a way to reveal some of those things that were happening that were so powerful and then make them the thing.
And the meaning of goals and the saving teachers' time while unifying instruction are kind of intertwined. They are still two separate bullet points, but super important. So one of them is we have expectations of student experiences, and this is really strange to say, but it is a floor of the quantity of experiences we expect students to have. Because without making that language explicit, without saying we want kids to write 4 to 6 analytical pieces within a 9-week period, there are folks who would design an entire year's worth of curriculum that maybe gave a student one chance in fourth quarter when they were already ready to go and be a 9th grader or something like that. So setting those goals in a curriculum that says these are representative of what we want as a district. And then also saving teachers time by saying, all right, we're all coming at this from the shared set of goals and a shared set of language. So if I know I'm teaching 8th grade at one school and Nannette's teaching 8th graders at another school, we know that 8th graders are hopefully having a shared experience, although not the same experience, not a scripted experience. No. Not interested in that whatsoever, and moving things forward. And then, which also speaks to the importance of rubrics as we're thinking those things through as well.
Well, and one of the things that we were able to do is really have conversations about what are we looking for when we look at analytical writing and narrative writing and research writing and expository pieces, and how do we develop common rubrics that also mirror the testing environments that they're going to see in the later years, SAT, PSAT, state testing, that also calibrates. So when Zach and I are both scoring a set of essays or providing students feedback, that we have an agreed set of things that we're looking for, and that provides some structure in that area as well. But this was a larger conversation too, and talking about rubrics really reveals our opinions about writing and how we teach it and what we expect students to be able to do. And do we believe in formulaic writing? Do we believe not in formulaic writing? And so that was a conversation that was important as well.
Go ahead.
I was going to jump into missing pieces and
Yeah.
purchased. And so the things I think that a lot of us as language arts teachers, and I guess any secondary or teachers with purchased curriculums, there are so many missing pieces. And I think a lot of times we just spend all of our time creating our own resources to make up for those missing pieces. And so we can go into what those pieces are, but what this allowed us to do while you build something is because you then just do that thing. So what is created is what I can use. I don't have to then additionally go out and find more reading pieces, more writing pieces, come up with more projects and etc. For my students. That's what I think about with missing pieces.
Yes, and that is a component of what we'll talk about in a second when we get to process. One of the key benefits for us is that if something is missing in general within the larger curriculum or small within with a module, which is what we call a 9-week unit, or within a year, one of our benefits is that we have a built-in review and revision cycle. So because we aren't talking about $1 million purchase or $1 million+ purchase every 7 years, we are talking about things being on a regular revision and review cycle where we pull in all of the stakeholders in our community to say what's working, what's not, what recommendations do you have, and then we turn it over to the professionals in our buildings to say, here's what the stakeholders have said. What do we know from our professional standpoint are things that make good pedagogical sense to shift. And if we have to do that every 7 years, then you are 7 years behind the time and you're never going to catch up. So that is a key benefit, I think, of what we're doing now.
The other benefit that I think that really came from this piece was also the feedback cycle and what we were doing in our classroom. So when we were creating assignments, creating resources, a lot of times we did that in a vacuum. And so by revealing that work and doing it together as a system, then we had better things happening in that curriculum pieces, as opposed to maybe things that weren't as critically looked at. I lost my words there.
There's a bit of quality control.
There it is. That's the word.
Inter-rater reliability.
There it is.
Heidi mentioned in the chat the importance of calibration as we're going through. So I think, and then the last piece I will say is that because we are licensing tools and platforms and not just giant boxes of things, we're buying into something that is built in the internet age, which sounds so strange to say in 2021. But what I mean by that is, if we bought from any of the big names, we get what they made that year. And if there's an updated version of that curriculum that comes out 2 years later, then what tends to be the answer is, all right, now you have to buy the entire thing over again. Versus with many of the partners that we've got here, as new features come online, we have access to those. So as things get better or errors get fixed, right, or something that is completely tone deaf to what content should be in a time, can get pulled out. And it's not like, oh, we actually don't look at pages 70 through 94 anymore, because those were blatantly like racist or misogynist. And so we're not going to do those today, but right, we can actually remove those pieces so that we can be updated to the needs of our community and be more responsive as we go through. The process, my favorite part. So yeah.
I'm going to go to the next.
Oh, yes.
There you go.
There we go. Sorry.
It's okay, go ahead.
That's why there are two of us, or we'd have everything messed up.
And I will say, something to celebrate here too is when Zach first started mentioning this to people, like, I almost wish you had a camera in front of you when you're like, hey, we should build, you did it really well, but like, we should build our own curriculum. Because I think my face was, because the process is, I think, what feels most abstract. And so you turn something so abstract into something so concrete and doable. So I'm excited about this part.
Yeah, and Tess we have a history of the process that Tess dropped into the chat. I'm going to go do a quick overview, but I realize that this is the piece that I get the most questions about. So choosing the path I already covered. The end of that meeting was the entirety of the leadership team, representative of all of our secondary schools, voting unanimously to do this. And I don't think if we hadn't been able to outline the process, and we did it semester by, like, here's the work of the first semester, the second semester, all the way through up to right now. If we hadn't done that, then I don't think we would have had any approval, because people just didn't have, if anybody's been through an education preparation program, you know that writing curriculum is not a component of that. You kind of have to stumble into it. And so that was the approval. And then we began the design process. And we started by putting out a call for design team members instead of adoption committee members. So design and team were very important words there. And on our first meeting, we started by saying we chose Wiggins, a modified version of Wiggins and McTighe's Understanding by Design. And so we started by saying to a group of people from 6th through 12th grade, what are the big questions you think a 6th grader should be tackling or would be good or would be interested in, all the way through 12th grade. And we got a room of about 50 people to come down to a set of 7 big grade level essential questions. And then we said, all right, now if that's the grade level essential question, what are some smaller questions you would think they should tackle within the quarter? What was fascinating in that process, I don't know if you remember this, in that process, if I was a 6th grade teacher, I got asked to look at like 11th grade questions. And there was friction from teachers who said, well, I don't teach high schoolers. And we said, well, no, but you teach people who are going to go into high school. And if you don't know what they're headed toward, then this is not going to work. And so I did not expect this resistance to be like, and a high school student saying, well, I don't know what middle schoolers do.
Yeah.
It became, and that goes back to that ownership question. Everybody wrote the essential questions 6 through 12. We didn't say only 6th grade teachers are writing 6th grade questions because we needed it to make sense.
Well, and also it was the first time that we kind of broke down the territories of the grade levels. We needed to start planting the seeds very early that no longer were things a 6th grade book or a 6th grade project. Like we had to start really showing people that it was a 6-12 approach and to see their grade level in the larger scheme of things and to take ownership over a broader swath of the curriculum rather than just the 1 or 2 grade levels that they taught, and especially between middle and high. Because we know that we can get very territorial as teachers, like, well, I've always taught this. I have to be the one that teaches this thing. And so to start with the questions asked was a way to also model and symbolize that shift.
So then we moved from essential questions. We took a break over the summer. So that was at the very end of the school year. And we had some foundational texts. And we said, if we wanted a pedagogical framework for this new curriculum, then what are some common texts we would have everybody read? And we picked 3, and they were because it was aligned with what we believe within our curriculum. One is 180 Days by Penny Kittle and Kelly Gallagher. These are in the document that Tess shared, by the way. 180 Days by Kittle and Gallagher. The Book Whisperer by
Donald Miller.
And the 6 academic writing tasks
by Burke.
By Jim Burke. Yeah, I can never remember if it's tasks or assignments. Somebody will put it in the chat because they're very smart. And so what we did is we had folks in the design team pick at least one of those texts and read it over the summer, so that when we came back together to do the work, people had a vision of, okay, here is what we believe, which we had never done. Or if we'd done it, we hadn't done it in a long time.
It was in recent memory.
To create a conversation about pedagogy before we talked about a conversation about what we wanted kids to do. We wanted to talk about why and how we thought they learned best as readers, writers, and communicators. Yeah, I heard that one, Heidi. Very good. And so each of those books also, they intersected, right? There was a lot of parallel content, but they also were not the same, right? There were things that Kelly Gallagher and Penny Kittle talked about that seemed at odds with what Jim Burke talked about. And people were like, well, why are we reading both of these books if they don't agree completely? And it was because these ideas don't all fit. It's not Tetris. It's not building your Jenga tower back up. This is, I don't know, a Pollock painting.
But we ultimately had to decide what our Jenga was, and that's where we were getting.
Yeah.
But we wanted people to read. We wanted to wrestle with the ideas. If we had read books that were echo chambers of themselves, then we wouldn't have landed where we did right now. And so that was really important to us.
The other piece I would say is then we came back together. And so we had done some work. A thing we took off the plate of our design team and we kind of contracted outside was, and we did a lot of this work too, is the summatives. So if you're familiar with understanding by design, you have your topics, you have your essential questions, your key standards, and then we kind of move into our summative assessment. And so we wanted to make sure that that phase one work got done. So then we could move it over to the design team to say, now, what are all the smaller blocks you need in place so that kids are able to do the summative? And
real quick note, that summative was still something that was feedback heavy, revision heavy. And we'll talk a second about some tips and tricks on how to get there. But it wasn't like we went away and built a summative and said, this is what you're using. It was very much a feedback process still.
Right. We wrote one summative assessment and then we stopped and said to the teaching team, to the design team, what do you think about this? Does it give you what you need? And got 2 rounds, I think, of good feedback on that. And then went into, okay, now we can build the other assessments. And for that, we looked at key experiences we want students to have in the ELA classroom from 6th through 12th grade. And looked at our state standards and said, okay, if they're supposed to be doing things with mixed media, how do we make sure that at least that this time asks kids to do that so that we know they're leaving middle school and high school with a certain set of experiences to be and practices that they're able to do.
This is also when we started to have conversations about the tools that we wanted to bring in. So coming into phase 2 and before the pilot, we started to have conversations. We took the things we now agreed on about pedagogy, and we applied that then to the digital tools that we were going to bring in and use, and the kinds of experiences we wanted kids to have. So we took that work and let it guide some of the selection we'll talk about here in a little bit.
And so, that was phase 1, right? We've got essential questions, we've got topics, we've got themes, we've got main key anchor standards.
Can I just ask so you've mentioned your design team a few times. Could you clarify to everyone what you meant by your design team? Were they teachers? Were they curriculum leaders? Who made up your design team?
They were teachers.
Wow.
And we, I think this is not a secret. We took anybody who applied.
Yeah.
And we said, if you are interested in doing this work, we want you to do this work. And if they were like, I'm interested, but I've never done this before, our answer was, that's okay. We can get you there.
Yep.
Because you clearly have some ideas. And it's important to get as many people. Yeah, exactly. If somebody wants to write curriculum, by all means, come on down. And we did. And then what we had were folks who went back to their departments and said, we're doing this. And then it grew. Yeah. And anybody who's done a curriculum adoption knows that is you tend to get melt, right? All of a sudden, this work is not as interesting or important as we thought it was. And we actually got more people joining our team as they were going through. So that was phase 1. Phase 2 is the pieces. What are the small tasks, medium-sized tasks that we want kids to do within a quarter that help prepare them for that summative and help them move toward understanding and building their abilities around those key, what we want kids to know and be able to do. So we did these things kind of in parallel because we needed them to happen. So as I said, we had a floor of the number of tasks. So, and this is our thing. This is not everybody in the world should do this. We think that every student should read at least one extended or novel length text per quarter. We think that they should be doing some routine every class period writing, and then analytical writing, narrative writing, and research writing, as well as reading literary and informational texts. Not uncommon to those of you who have read the Common Core standards. So we took the pieces from that we thought were really important and helpful and said, at the bare minimum, this is what kids should be doing every 9 weeks. At the same time we were doing that, we started entertaining platforms because we knew we could build content, but we did not have necessarily the resources to code out all of the tools we were hoping to get as we were going along the way. And Nannette really headed up the evaluation piece of that. And I'll stop talking now.
Yeah, no, and you'll be able to see kind of the fruit of the labor. But yeah, we started by having the pedagogical conversations. And then once we had that information, we kind of did the research for teachers and brought back, based on what they recommended, here's a list of tools. In the resources that we share with you at some point, in there we include like the questions that we have. Our district technology department has a very intensive rubric that makes sure that whatever tool we're looking at fits into our system. But the design team was most interested in, does it fit into our system from a pedagogical standpoint? And so we really started to narrow that down in phase 2. And then we also had to figure out where everything was going to live. And that was an interesting conversation as well, where we asked our teachers to get together. And we really talked about, hey, when you have to go find your curriculum, what do you want that to look like? And in previous years and in previous instances, it wasn't always what they wanted it to be. And so we were able to do more of a design thinking challenge on that piece. And I think we ended up creating something that was really powerful for them to navigate through.
And then the last piece is, as we were picking our texts, we looked at the kind of how do we move away from the canon. So some of the pre-work leading up to this was I asked 2 years ahead of time, I asked folks, what are the books that get read in your schools at a whole class level? And then I compared and I looked at, like, if I started as a 6th grader in this school and I went to the districted high school, what is the chance that I would interact with an author of color or an author of any kind of diverse representation, or any kind of representation from a historically marginalized point of view? And the percentages were very small. And so we had to have conversations about, well, how many is enough? And the answer is, there is no answer to that question. We're not talking about checking a box, but we're saying that a student shouldn't make it through a grade level without as many different perspectives from a literary standpoint as possible. And so we checked all of those pieces, and we didn't get it exactly right. And we'll talk about that in the challenges and our plans ahead. But we were at least able to say, what are the voices we need to bring in here? And how are we making sure that we have as diverse an initial collection as we possibly can? And that was incredibly important from the beginning versus trying to retrofit that later on, as I know a lot of our colleagues across the world are having to do as they start to think about, oh, our kids can't see themselves in the curriculum that they've built. I should say that right about tasks and experiences was wrapping up, a little thing called the pandemic happened, which definitely sidelined our work. One of the really cool things that happened as a part of that is we got to release what we had designed before we even went to pilot, because these resources were built to be modular and be used across any platform. And so all of a sudden, we said, well, we haven't really tested this with anybody, but go and use and do these things.
Yeah. And through that, we were able to see, first of all, the malleable, like it was a very malleable piece, and we didn't realize even that was possible. We also, speaking of the interest blossoming even more into the work, people started to realize that this was actually going to be something that was kind of a game changer in our system. And so we were able to, so while the pandemic was something that was very difficult for so many and for so many teachers, being able to hand them this and say, actually, we're ready for this more than we even thought we were, I think was really helpful for a lot of them. And it was exciting to see that work come to life so quickly. But we did still need to do a pilot. And starting a pilot in a pandemic definitely presented its own fair share of challenges.
When nobody had any idea what school would look like in the fall. We left on spring break and never came back, like so many people did. And so I put out a call, and remarkably, people put their hands up. A number of folks in the design team said, I'd like to continue on. And then it just kind of kept going. And so we had to retrofit that. And so what we did was we built a series of emails of here's what the stuff is. So every day for 4 weeks, there was a little bit of an overview of here's the process, kind of what we're doing now, but prolonged and giving the folks some time to work through it. And at the end of the email, you were supposed to have your unit plan for quarter 1 taken care of at the end of those 4 weeks. During each of those 4 weeks, we set up check-ins from 8:30 to 9 o'clock p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays for folks to jump in and say, all right, I've got questions about what I've got going on. It didn't work for everybody. It worked for some people, but I needed to be available, and we couldn't get together face to face. And I don't think anybody was hungry for another online meeting at that point in time.
No.
And so we did that piece as well.
Mm-hmm.
So then we moved into the pilot, and we set up two key pieces here that were different. One was we had somebody else, not me, run focus groups with each grade level, feedback sessions once per quarter at the end of the quarter to say what worked, same questions every time. What worked, what didn't work, what do you need, and what did you build that you think you would be good to share? And we compiled those, and then we contracted two of our teachers to handle the revisions and edits to those pieces. So whatever feedback we got, because we owned it, we were able to immediately build into the tools for next year to be able to see. Work.
I think that was it.
Yeah. I do want to mention tight and loose.
That comes. Oh yeah.
So we have a bias toward choice in this work. We have a bias toward choice. One of our pedagogical frameworks is the theory of situated motivation, that it is a situation or a task that can be motivational, not necessarily a person. And so we know that choice is an important component of creating motivation within a situation. And so we wanted to create teacher choice so that in the hopes that they would then feel more open to creating student choice. Mm-hmm. So the summative and on-demand tasks and the number of experiences are the tight pieces. And then from there, it is loose to say, all right, we've given you some analytical tasks, but you don't have to do all of these. You could make your own. Just make sure that they're heading toward the phase one pieces of what we're trying to do. It also gave our administrators something to be like, oh, I know what to look for, especially if they've never taught an English class before. And so we knew things would look different. And one of the pieces we learned is that new tools take time in a pandemic. When you have already done 4 different approaches to teaching, saying, ooh, would you like to learn this incredibly robust platform? People tend to put their hands down at that point and be like, no, not right now. So we needed to be able to adjust to the needs of our population again.
Yeah.
All right.
I agree with that.
Yep. We got that already. Yeah. We did that.
Oh.
In the chat, what are your pedagogical goals?
Oh, and now we're going to jump over the chat.
I'm going to see it.
Well, could you guys just sort of just briefly repeat what you said your sort of goals were, just so that to catch everyone up, to give them some inspiration?
Yeah, we wanted kids to be doing writing. We wanted kids to be doing, it seems like a silly thing to say, but a lot of research has been done into the idea that in an English classroom, the percent of time kids do stuff and not actually reading, not actually writing, not actually discussing is really, is off-putting. So we wanted to move as close as possible to doing the thing. And this comes from David Perkins, Making Learning Whole. The way he talks about it is have kids play the whole game. And so we wanted to do that as much as possible. We also knew that in an ELA classroom, we saw feedback cycles were not.
Yeah, I was going to say something that we really, really saw was like the writing process, and specifically the feedback that's built into that process and what that looks like for students and their experiences at being a real writer, right? Like a writer is going to have intense amounts of feedback and cycles that they go through. With that too, is we really wanted authentic reasons to write. And so we've really brought in other parts of content and discipline to really expand. I think of the work of the counselors on building in some of the
social emotional
things. We really wanted that to be a part of the experience. So I would say also authentic reasons to do the work, which is what you were kind of speaking to, as important as well.
And then a key shift was we do not teach books.
There it is.
We teach children to read, write, and communicate. And that we have a bias and a belief that there's not a single text that has been written that everybody needs to read in school. Instead, these essential questions were what we're trying to answer. So that was our goal. It wasn't like, now I'm teaching Gatsby.
Now I teach Gatsby for 4 weeks.
It was, I need to use these texts as lenses through which kids can look to come up with their answers.
Yep.
And so then all of a sudden it opens up a world of literary possibilities.
I will speak here too a tiny bit about vocabulary and grammar. There was a lot of initial well, what about vocabulary? What about grammar instruction? Like, these are not explicitly listed in our curriculum. And so one of the beliefs that we came to, and especially that the design team came to, was really seeing those things embedded in that routine writing and in the tasks that we were asking students to do. And that comes back to feedback as well, right? Like the things that we're looking for as writers. So that was something I think that is really important, but it was embedded and not something that we pulled out.
When you were talking about building momentum, I'd love to, go back for a second, reminder that you included teachers in writing the process. So is that how you felt like you built momentum, was to really include them?
Yes, that was a piece of it. In the same way that our design team grew over the course of the design process, our pilot team grew. Think about that. In a pandemic, more people raised their hand and said, I would like to try this completely new thing than we had started with.
Yeah.
It also, I think, comes from the choice element that we said, not you do this on day 1, you do this on day 2, you do this on day 3. We said, here are the things that need to be in a quarter. How are you going to do? What are you going to do? And that rubbed people the wrong way too, because you can't please everybody.
Yeah.
Some people are like, no, tell me what to do on day 1. Tell me what to do on day 2. And we needed more agency for our teaching staff on that one. And we needed to realize where we needed to build some supports as we were going through. This link is in the chat for folks who need it.
While Zach is typing, so this was one of the important things is you could build something incredible, but if it wasn't easy to find, access, and understand how to process through it, then it wasn't going to work.
Right.
If it just lived in a Google Drive somewhere, we knew that wasn't going to be something that could help teachers and really bring it to life. And so this was created by a smaller team that helped with a larger design project that I mentioned earlier. So we talked about all of those things that we wanted in a website, and that's what we got. So you guys can explore that. Did you have the link?
All right. We talked about this.
We did. We talked about it. We asked big questions and we had tough conversations, and we definitely had some conversations about what we really believe about the tools that we bring into our classrooms as readers and writers, and had tough talks about plagiarism tools and grammatical quiz kind of tools, reading collections. There were so many things that were on the table initially because we really wanted to lay everything out there and then narrow down. The thing we did not want was multiple things. That is exhausting for a system. And so we chose a reading tool and we chose a writing tool after our process.
So the tool we chose for reading is commonlit.org. You can go ahead and find it. They are not our sponsor, so we are not going to talk too deeply about them right now. But what we came down to on the writing side was Writable. And we looked at a pretty good list of folks and asked what the pedagogical alignment was and the technological fit and all those kinds of components. I am, though I have and perhaps because I have a pretty deep history with educational technology, I am naturally suspect of technological tools.
Always. Cynical. I'm almost cynical.
I am, yeah. I'm a big curmudgeon. It's amazing that I do webinars. I will write it down on parchment and send it out to all the people.
But Writable, sorry.
No, you go ahead.
But Writable was one of those tools that really rose above when we asked the tough questions that were beliefs about what we thought writing instruction looked like in the classroom. And the adaptability piece that Writable brings, that was really important to us. The authentic feedback options, the flexibility, build it as we go. These are really powerful things, and of course, just-in-time support.
I'm gonna move forward so we can see some of that, and we're gonna talk through this this video as we watch.
The audio.
We're the audio.
There's a lot of prompts.
Yeah.
There's over 1,000 assignments, so your assessments, if you are doing assessments, but also lots of reading and writing.
The login works with multiple LMSs, so Google, Microsoft, Schoology. or just living in the Writable realm. You don't have to log in with any of those. Here's us.
What's really great is it device. Oh, sorry, Tess.
Oh yeah, you guys were able to log in via Schoology, which was helpful. And then what's going to pop up here is, we have where you're looking through those 1,000 already pre-built assignments and prompts. We're going to show you one of our newest ones from KQED. So those are really great, engaging, and great for summer learning. So you've got your side-by-side videos and readings next to your prompts, and then your rubric that teachers and students see.
And this was a piece that we liked, is that the conversation about writing doesn't take place at the end when a grade has been given.
Yeah.
We like that teachers can jump in and comment on student writing while it's happening. But we also like that students are asked to be reflective on their work before they even hit submit. Did I do the things I was asked to do? And then here is our library of all of these assignments as they go through.
So you do your custom assignments that were easily accessible to teachers, right? Just by clicking My District.
Yes.
Yep.
And so previewing as a student, folks can see what they're looking at. This was a piece on many platforms. You couldn't see what a student saw.
Yeah.
And Writable made it possible to be like, oh, this is what the children will see in my classroom.
Yeah.
As they're going through.
Right.
I would say the big piece here is, as the reviewer, you can notice that it has some really powerful scaffolding for students to give feedback to each other, as well as sentence stems, which I really loved. Like the place to be like, hey, here's some ways to talk to another person about their writing. The feedback is anonymous, which is also really powerful for our students. It's pretty easy to create assignments and rubrics. We were lucky to partner with Writable a bit on this, but then also we know that there are just so many ways to adapt what they've already got. You have graphic organizers.
Yeah. So, I mean, whether you are building your own curriculum in Writable or you're connecting with our curriculum team to support you, there's, whether you're a single teacher or your entire district, like you have those options, right? And it's super easy and very quick to create an assignment.
Our initial plan was that we would be building all our assignments in Writable, and then the pandemic happened. I don't know if I mentioned that. And so all of a sudden, the teaching force that we thought we were going to be able to build these pieces needed to focus on how they were going to teach the rest of the year online. So we were able to work with Writable to figure out a way to get these assignments built internally to Writable so that the pilot was able to just start.
Which again is really, go ahead, Tess.
I was going to say, you can see, your district rubric items are in there, your district rubrics are in there. So a teacher who was building an assignment, say from something they read in New York Times this morning, was going to be able then to attach their district standards right to that rubric, right?
Yeah.
So on the go, not just what you created, but as you create, I think.
Yep. Absolutely.
And that's one of the pieces we like, is that because the standards are linked to the rubric, the data on the back end shows a teacher, shows an administrator, shows a team how students are doing across different standards, different categories.
Yep.
And so there's a readout to be able to target that instruction, so that for those folks who are worried about grammar instruction, who are worried about vocabulary, could do a really specific focus on that grammar based on the information that came back.
Because where students are struggling. So instead of us all going through and looking at this one particular sentence, this one particular worksheet about grammar, instead it's embedded into the resource itself.
Yeah. So you also just saw, that was an assignment using some of your common lit writing. So those were really easy to upload via PDF. So all of those common lit readings that you had were pretty simple to add in.
Definitely. It is one of the pieces is everything is robust. And one of the pieces is everything is really simple. So, yeah.
Yeah, and then this is just a little short slide about Writable's feedback. So I know feedback was really important to you guys as you were building and creating your curriculum and actually rolling it out to teachers that they could facilitate that. So Writable has a pretty unique set of feedback options that save time, especially for peer and self-review, which can take a long time if you're a teacher actually running that in class without the tools, making your grading faster, tying it to your LMS, giving audio video feedback during the pandemic, I know was especially helpful for a lot of teachers, the ability to do that. And then also those AI pieces, if teachers do want to use them. So on-demand revision and grammar and stuff like that. And then that was just a picture of what it looks like on the teacher side. So you can actually see how a class is doing by an assignment. And yeah, so I'm curious, how did it work out?
Yeah.
It's working out very well.
Yeah.
So the pieces that have been really helpful is that for the folks who didn't, I talked about tools being an impediment, not because of the tool, but because teachers had, I think, an internal, I don't have time to learn a new thing. What we have seen as the kind of pressure has lifted in this second semester and they have started to use things, I've been getting way more feedback of, oh, why didn't I use this earlier? And I've been getting more of a, like, this is not as scary as I thought it was at all. Because, and this was a piece we learned, because it is incredibly robust as a tool, folks thought they had to turn everything on at the beginning. And what we have said is, no, just start simple, start small, and build those tools on as you go. And that's been really great. Also, the feedback teachers have been, it was one of our goals, and it is one of the things I think we've accomplished. Teachers have talked about how feedback has improved from their students, how they have been able to give better feedback. And there has been, this is not an expected, but a helpful one that we haven't talked about, is that their time spent grading has been greatly reduced.
I actually think it was more expected than we.
Less expected for me,
especially because of the nature of the tool itself, right? It allows you to be more focused as opposed to just you and that pen looking through a paper. I know that that's a really important thing as well. And I think the thing that we talked about in lessons learned, if you flip through at the end, is that we do need some more time to talk about the tool to provide some of that initial training and support for our teachers. So we know about that as well.
Yeah, so I put this in here, but you can go create a free Writable account and explore it. But let's, I think, end with our challenges and advice, and we'll take questions too. So the big challenge,
the pandemic come up before.
I feel like that was one challenge.
Yeah, running a real pilot was also tough. People were coming under the assumption of, oh, you've already decided what we're doing, and so you don't actually need my feedback. And so getting people to really realize, oh no, what you say matters. We need to hear what works and what doesn't, was more of a challenge than we had anticipated.
Along with that is the ability of teachers to believe in themselves as designers of curriculum. A lot of them had created so much behind a closed door that to bring it out in the open and to think that what they had to say was worth saying as a designer was very powerful, especially because we had to build that and we had to give that confidence. That was kind of our role, was champion of their work. And so that was really, really important as well.
Removing the gray market.
Yes. Oh.
Like, I did this, but I don't want anybody to know I do it because they might tell me to stop. Versus, no, what are you doing? Tell us about it. Communication plans needs to start before the start. So any process you're doing, plan how you're going to talk to everybody in your community about it. Because otherwise people are going to feel left out afterward.
Don't try to make it perfect from the beginning. I think one of the things that we've even stumbled through making the questions is how quickly we got wrapped up in a particular word or a connotation of something. And so get to your minimum viable product and know that it is in beta.
All the time.
And it will change. And that's okay. And I think that's a reverse too from getting a packaged curriculum where it's like, no, it's done.
When you ask for feedback, mean it. Actually want people to tell you what they think, and be prepared to ask again, because people are used to being asked, what do you think? And it's like when you ask, hey, how are you doing?
I'm fine.
Yeah, I'm fine too. Well, but do you really mean it?
Yeah.
And so being prepared to ask again and again until people realize you're actually curious about it.
And point out when you've made changes based on feedback so that they know that what they said mattered. I think sometimes that has to be explicit for people.
Be clear on what is tight and what is loose so people know what they can edit and change. And then if you are a leader, let someone else take the temperature. I knew, because this was, as much as we had ownership, I was heading up this project, that if I was asking for all of the feedback, I would have a chilling effect on that feedback. People who didn't like things would probably not say it because they were worried about my ego. And so instead, we asked other folks to say, you lead this conversation. I'm not even going to be in there. Or if I was there, my mic was off, my video was off. They just saw my little black box of a name. I should have changed the name and been like, Rob.
Something. Something.
All right. So those are our big things. Tess, we have more time. I know we're running close, but I don't want to miss
we'll take some questions. I'm just going to run through these slides. So for the resources that we shared today, if you would like to explore assignments and create a free account, there's also some of the St. Vrain assignments in that resource doc if you would like to look at them or use them with your own students. You can also check out, we have a summer school program featuring KQED, which has some really great engaging assignments. And you can also email our curriculum team. I think, you guys know Writable is a team, right? Not just.
Can I say this before? Because I don't want you to say it because it'll sound like you work for Writable. I don't work for Writable. And it is important to know that a big piece for us is that humans are always on the other side. Is that if you use the chat in the help function, there's a human who's answering. It's not an AI that you filter through before you get to a person. That when I send an email, a human is writing back. That was huge for us because we know the value of education is in being high touch, even when you're high tech. And so that is a piece for us that is super, super important. And I'm sorry that Tess almost had to say that because that is a thing that we truly love.
But we do actually have a promo going on for building some start of the school custom assignments and rubrics. So if anybody does want to check that out, if anybody would like to work with us and see how it works to get some custom assignments or rubrics in there, whether you own a curriculum or you're building one, even if you own one, it can be really customized or better fit your district or classroom standards. And then let's take some questions. Let's see. So one of I thought, great question is, do you use the lapse concept in 180 days?
Some of our teachers are. It's not built into the curriculum because not everybody had read the book. And so we built it into a year of professional learning for our folks. So more people will be, I think, using the lapse concept. But it is because not everybody did that reading. It was just the design team thus far. We haven't built it in for everybody because we're getting there.
Yeah.
I thought another really good question was the being grounded in scientific research based in versus some of the other ways that you did things. So what is the value versus maybe also the value of stepping away sometimes from always grounding in scientifically based research and building your curriculum?
It's a blend of both, right? So the scientific research, as much as statistics will tell you, or it's applicable to as many, so few educational studies meet the double blind, right? The control double blind, and so
because of ethical issues.
Because we're talking about children. So we use as much of it as possible, but then we also ask, what is it our space needs, our place needs, and which is also research based, right? Louise Mall and his team around funds of knowledge, all of those pieces, asking kind of what is all of the sciences, I guess is how I would say.
And part of building ownership too is leaning into the experiences of our teachers. And so you wouldn't want to say, well, we're only going to look at scientific research and the academic research that exists around this and not value deeply your experiences, but you're going to build it. Yeah. And so we really wanted to bring in voices of the anecdotal pieces that come from our teachers.
Yeah, I don't know if Heidi or Becky want to jump on, and if there are any questions I missed that might have come in through chat, I'm going to scroll up a little bit. But if did anything else come up for advice, or I know you also mentioned challenges to come. What do you anticipate your upcoming challenges might be?
One we know is around selection of texts. We have some work there. We aren't where we want to be yet. And so that is maybe not a challenge, but definitely an opportunity.
We're going into revision next year. So we're taking a middle school grade and a high school grade, and we're saying what doesn't work already. Yeah. And so that's going to be a challenge. And moving to full implementation next year with a teaching force that has done an amazing job navigating all of these changes. And so making sure that we are sensitive to everybody's needs as well.
I did also see another question about grammar and the importance of grammar and whether you focused on it or stayed away from it.
I'm going to go back to David Perkins on this one. So if you waited every time for somebody to be perfect at pitching a ball before you let them play a t-ball game, oh dear. then you never get them to play the game. And so what we do is we ask kids to do writing, and we ask them to do reading, and we see what goes well and we see what goes poorly, and then we teach those skills as needed, so that we're not saying you might be bad at this, because we know students tend to internalize that as I am bad at this.
Or we spend our time doing something that isn't a weakness in their particular writing, or we do too much of it, right? Like we look at okay, we're going to look at all the ways you can use a comma, but you haven't written anything authentically in the last 2 weeks to really practice using commas, right? There's that authentic piece I think is really important.
Yeah.
And grammar is still a direct teaching opportunity, but it's so embedded in what students are doing as a writer.
Yes.
It's not just whatever workbook page that grammar workbook came with that day.
I guess one of my questions is, and this could be leading, is how are your teachers identifying what does need to be taught when it comes to grammar? Are they using Writable data? Are they looking at dashboards? How are they, taking data that they might get on how things are going and pushing it back into their instruction?
Yes.
Yes.
I know that you didn't ask a yes or no question, but yes, they're doing all of those things. And that's important because we aren't positioning any tool, digital or physical, as the thing. We are really relying on the value of a body of evidence. Yeah. And so if Writable leads you to think a certain thing might be true, do you see that in kids' journaling as well? Right? So it's not, because we know that a student might struggle using a keyboard.
Yeah.
And so the grammar might be a problem there because of the keyboard. So if we take the keyboard away, is that error still present? If the answer is yes, then we have a better signal that error needs our attention at that point in time. And so all of those are kind of like raising your hand and saying, Nannette's got a problem with commas.
She does.
If you see 4 hands up about Nannette's comma problem, then you're going to take her to the Splice Academy and help her work it out.
Yeah. Well, and also I want to say too, I think we also, as a belief system, we really believe that our students should own, they should know what the standard is and what they're trying to get to. And so we also want students to identify some of their own mistakes like that, right? Like we build that into the structure as well, in the routine writing especially, where it's like, okay, go back and what part doesn't sound right, or what part, we teach them how to look at that critically to start to identify their mistakes as well. So yes, we as a teacher can identify them, but it's even more powerful when students are starting to identify those as well.
Awesome. Well, I think we've answered all the questions that came up that we didn't answer in chat. I don't know if you guys have anything else to add, but I do just want to thank you so much for taking the time today to share your journey. And we love working with you, and we're so excited to keep working with you and revising and creating a really wonderful curriculum for your students.
Thanks so much, Tess. Thanks everybody for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.